Welcome you to today's presentation about how archives and archivists can join efforts across the United States to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We are only 14 short months away from 2026, and this is an incredible opportunity for us to highlight archives for the general public. Archives across the country hold the essential evidence of our cultures, our society, and our democracy. As stewards of this incredible wealth of information, we can play a major role in the commemoration and forge relationships that can last long after the 250th is over. So before getting to our program today, we want to let you know that we are recording today's presentation so SAA members and others can learn about this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity after we're done here. And we'll also be taking questions later in the hour. Please use the chat function in Zoom to pose your questions, and then myself, me, and colleague from SAA, Julia, will moderate those questions for our guest. So with that, it is time to introduce Madeleine Rosenberg. We're delighted to have her here today. Madeleine is a member of the Strategic Initiatives team at the American Association for State and Local History, which is the nation's foremost professional association for history organizations and practitioners. At AASLH, Madeleine's focus includes the research, advocacy, and major partnerships and initiatives, including helping the history field prepare for the upcoming U.S. Semiquincentennial. Prior to joining AASLH, Madeleine served as the public humanities specialist at the Princeton Public Library and as chief public historian for New Jersey Historical Commission. She was previously the director of exhibit development at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum. She is a 2021 graduate of the History Leadership Institute, and she holds a dual MA, MSc in International and World History from Columbia and the London School of Economics, as well as a BA in History from Brown University. So please join us in welcoming Madeleine so we can learn a little bit more about the 250th and how we can get involved.
Thank you so much. Hopefully everyone can hear me, but message me in the chat or raise your hand if you can. And I'm just going to share my screen, but I just want to, thank you all for inviting me to be here today. And I'm really excited to get to speak with all of you. So just give me a second while I share my screen. Let me try that. All right. Can everyone see? Well, speak up if you can't see it. How about that? Because I can't actually see any of you while I'm speaking.
Yes, we can see
that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So thank you. As Brian said, I'm Madeleine Rosenberg and I work for AASLH. Just to give you a sense of how today is going to go, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on AASLH and the 250th. I'm going to share what's going on at the national and state level, and then I'm going to circle back to spotlight some AASLH planning tools that I think will be helpful. Along the way, we're also going to, highlight different factors and considerations to keep in mind. So, for those of you who don't know, AASLH is the National Professional Association for History Institutions and the staff and volunteers who make them run. We offer resources, guidance, training, advocacy, publications, field-wide research, and a sense of connectedness to over 5,500 institutional and individual members. And our staff provides leadership for practitioners of all stripes at the nation's more than 21,000 history organizations. So today, I want to share with you a sense of excitement, optimism, and urgency about the US 250th anniversary, or Semiquincentennial. Above all, I want to emphasize the need to articulate a bold vision for this once-in-a-generation event. I want to encourage you all to think imaginatively and critically about this anniversary, and I'm going to discuss some resources that can help you do so. So, for many of you, the Semiquincentennial may not have been on your radar until relatively recently. Some of you are maybe still learning how to pronounce it or spell it, but more importantly, it may still be unclear what planning for it should entail. How do you commemorate the 250th, especially if your site or organization doesn't have a clear connection to the Revolutionary era or to commemoration overall? How do you mark the anniversary in a way that will welcome both new and existing audiences? And I encourage us all to think about audiences very broadly. What can you do that will have a meaningful and long-lasting impact? And how can you approach interpreting and reflecting on stories about the American past, especially in today's environment? So we believe the answer to those questions lies in thinking broadly and creatively about the 250th. It's an occasion that calls on us to explore our country's past, not just in the Revolutionary era, but beginning millennia before 1776 and continuing to the present. We must ensure that Americans of all ages and backgrounds and in all places see themselves in history and appreciate its relevance. And the 250th can help us to show audiences not just that history matters, but that their history matters. But I want to step back for a moment and consider the significance of anniversaries overall. So why do they matter, and what are the opportunities and limitations that they present? So on the one hand, anniversaries are a great chance to draw attention and provide focus. They let us reckon and reflect and inspire. They also serve as opportunities to identify and clarify our priorities and help us, choose and define what's really important to us in this moment. They're a chance to revisit dominant narratives to make them more accurate and inclusive. And they're also a chance to take those priorities and spur action and momentum and energy to take on ambitious projects and to leverage the optimism and enthusiasm that often comes with anniversaries. On the other hand, anniversaries can be divisive. Not everyone agrees on what should be commemorated or how or who should be a part of conversations about how that commemoration looks. Even if you agree on what to commemorate, your priorities might be different or in conflict with one another. And when it comes to revisiting those dominant narratives, not everybody will want to, or not everyone will mean the same thing when they want to revisit them. And then finally, even if you have lots of momentum and optimism and energy, you can be under constraints based on limited resources and complex contours of power that so many of us face. So commemoration, it's complicated stuff, right? I think we can probably sum it all up by saying that the most important role commemorations can play is to provide an opportunity to grapple with history's complexity. They allow us to reflect on the past, address issues in the present, and prepare, better for the future. And that's what makes them matter. How and what we commemorate matters. So at this point, I do want to briefly mention that 2026 is going to be a big year for anniversaries overall. Not only is it the US 250th, but it's also a major anniversary for some states, such as Colorado, which is marking its 150th. It's also the 5th anniversary of January 6th and the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. So these are just a few examples, but I want you all to keep this in mind, that there may be thematic and interpretive opportunities throughout the year, depending on your organization's mission, scope, location, and audience. And this is an exercise that you can do regularly in long-term planning. What anniversaries or milestones are coming up that may be meaningful to your communities? We should remember that people have the power to make meaning of dates and milestones and identify moments to reflect, reckon, and make change. So all of this is true for the 250th, and I think keeping these factors in mind can help us be more intentional and strategic in our preparations for the anniversary. So diving into the 250th, since 2016, AASLH has been a driving force for a 250th that advances a full picture of American history and solidifies the role of museums, archives and special collections, historic sites, and similar organizations as vital institutions. One key area of our efforts has been working to collaboratively set a field-wide vision for the 250th. From AASLH's perspective, we have two great opportunities here. The first is to promote an honest, full telling of American history as we continue to make progress towards that more perfect union where there's truly liberty and justice for all. And second, to attract interest, investment, and support from museums and other organizations, strengthening the field and in turn, the nation for generations to come. And it's these two pillars that I really want to emphasize. First, that the 250th will provide all Americans with the chance to encounter stories from the full sweep of our shared history, showcasing a vision of the American past in which everyone sees themselves represented. Highlighting histories that reflect the country's diversity, both past and present, can provide a more widely shared understanding of the nation's history and why it matters today. And this fuller vision of the past can inform contemporary challenges to help us continue making progress in our society. And then that second pillar, we're hoping that the 250th will also strengthen the field and enhance its ability to serve our communities and states and country. The anniversary offers a rare chance to invest in the institution and people that make up the nation's historical infrastructure, ensuring that our stories and objects and documents are preserved and shared for generations to come. So the lead up to 2026 is a chance to prioritize history and civics funding for museums and libraries and archives, special collections, and education in a way that can have an impact long after the 250th has ended. It's a major opportunity for supporting the work of smaller institutions in particular, which make up the vast majority of organizations, history organizations in this country. And we think history organizations can use this moment to re-envision their relationships to their communities, demonstrate their impact, and make themselves attractive to new sources of investment. So, over the past several years, AASLH has developed a variety of programs, tools, and other efforts to help history organizations prepare for the 250th. We produce webinars and workshops and publications to help institutions think about their approach to planning. So, for example, last year, we convened a virtual summit exploring the ethics of commemoration. And earlier this year, we convened another one looking at how to navigate today's polarized partisan environment about history. Many of these events were recorded and can be found for a fee on our website. And our website also includes, I'm going to click to it, a national initiative tracker featuring information about major 250th projects that are already underway. We've also convened major stakeholders for several years, including a national coordinating committee made up of key players to share information and maximize opportunities for collaboration. And we regularly convene representatives of the state 250th commissions to help them communicate with one another and learn from one another and collectively advance this effort. Additionally, I'll just mention a few more. We continue to produce a range of other resources that are both directly and indirectly supporting 250th efforts. So our Reframing History research project offers evidence-backed recommendations for how to effectively communicate about the value of inclusive history. Our Standards and Excellence program, or STEPS, offers best practices training for small institutions. We have a technical leaflet series that has a variety of practical advice for organizations on everything from strategic planning to building DIY exhibitions. And perhaps most importantly, in 2021, we published the Making History at 250 field guide. We've mailed more than 30,000 copies of it around the country, and countless more are available digitally for free on our website. A few months ago, we published a handbook of low-cost practical programming ideas that are appropriate for the 250th to offer really concrete inspiration to complement the thematic guide in the guidance in the field guide. I'm going to spend a little bit of time later on going into more detail on these two resources. So I'm just going to pause there because I want to zoom out and emphasize that we're not doing this work alone. Just to give you a picture of what's happening at the national level. Formal efforts began at the national level in 2016 when Congress established the U.S. Semiquincentennial Commission. This is made up of 8 members of Congress, 16 private citizens, and several heads of major agencies, federal agencies. The commission, in turn, created the America 250 Foundation, which some of you may have heard of. This was the nonprofit partner of the commission with the staff to carry out the commission's vision. Recently, the commission and foundation underwent leadership changes and restructuring, and Rosie Rios, a former treasurer of the United States, has become the chair of the commission. And I should mention that our latest understanding is that these two entities are now one and the same. They are actively working with state commissions and other stakeholders to prepare large-scale, what they're calling tentpole programming for 2026. So last summer, for example, they launched America's Field Trip, an essay contest for students, which is now in its 2nd cycle. They also recently launched America Gives, which is a volunteerism, charitable giving, and service-oriented initiative. And then they're also launching what they're calling an oral storytelling and history project called Our American Story that will collect interviews across the country via a road tour. And we're anticipating seeing more announcements soon. So we believe that each of these national efforts will include opportunities for federal agencies and state and local organizations to participate, but how thoroughly that integration will happen is still a big question. America 250's ultimate vision from its inception has been that most of the 250th will be decentralized and happen at the grassroots level. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And since this is always the first question I get, I'm going to add that we don't expect the Federal Commission to be a major source of funding for state and local projects in any direct way. So there are also other major national entities that are making their own plans. For example, the National Park Service has ambitious plans for updating interpretations investing in infrastructure, and providing new ways of connecting Americans to our nation's history. IMLS, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, and the National Archives are all deep into their own planning processes. PBS is launching a new film from Ken Burns on the American Revolution. Youth engagement nonprofit Made by Us has established a Youth 250 initiative to directly help organizations looking to connect with young adults as part of their 250th anniversary. So this is just a few examples, but there's a lot going on. And even more is happening at the state level. So far, we count 52 states and territories that have created commissions or similar formal entities to lead planning, with more action pending. And I'm just going to give you a sampling. The approaches vary widely from state to state. So Colorado, as I mentioned, is using the 250th to also mark its 150th anniversary. New Jersey, for example, has seen a huge public investment, including a $500,000 annual appropriation. They're using this investment to develop curriculum guides and educator resources for connecting history and social studies classrooms to the 250th. They've also announced a $25 million investment in the state's Revolutionary Era historic sites to ready them for 2026. They're producing public programs and community level events. What else? Let's see. North Carolina has developed several initiatives, including digitizing archival materials, planning educational resources, and large-scale public events. Pennsylvania, no surprise, had one of the first state commissions and has had a very strong county-by-county engagement effort, as well as a significant effort in private fundraising and heritage tourism preparations. Just one more example. Utah is emphasizing the peoples of Utah, the many diverse immigrant and ethnic and religious groups that make up the state, and they're basing this commemoration planning on a publication that their state did for the bicentennial in 1976. So those are just a few, examples to keep in mind. Other states have begun exploring a wide range of activities, from launching new state museums to new outreach efforts to infrastructure investments and more. But I think the crucial point here is that the 250th can be used to spark new interest and investment in projects related to history and to accelerate timelines on ambitious goals for the state's history and civics community. So that's what's happening more or less in terms of planning at the national and state levels. Like I said, I'd like to spend a little bit of time diving deeper into some of the signature resources that AASLH has created to help the field make the most of 2026. So much of the work that's happening at the national and state and local levels has been informed by the themes in our Making History at 250 field guide, which was developed with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities and in collaboration with leading scholars and public history professionals. It provides interpretive themes to connect a disparate range of state and local history programming to a cohesive national initiative. And each of the guiding themes is broken out into several specific questions that can help shape programming. So any of them could spark an exhibition or a community conversation or lesson plans or local history projects or even your own internal conversations. So I know this may be familiar to some of you, but just to recap, I want to run through the 5 themes quickly. So the first is unfinished revolutions, the idea that the fight for liberty, equality, and justice has a long and complex history. Through politics, grassroots organizing, boycotts, protests, and litigation, and other means, people have continually challenged America to live up to its highest ideals. We also have the power of place, the idea that thinking about location and land and resources can challenge us to think beyond modern political boundaries and consider the full history of the spaces within what we now call the United States. So engaging with place enables us to reconsider significant questions about our history. We have We the People, which opens questions about how the US has included and excluded groups from full participation and representation in the nation's political, economic, and cultural life. Over time, America has incorporated more people of different backgrounds into our society as diverse populations have staked their claim on belonging and pressed for a more pluralistic, equitable nation. So if you use this theme, you could ask yourself, for instance, who is considered an American and who gets to decide and when? Also got American experiment, the idea that the leaders of the founding era knew that they did not have all the answers, and while their representative democracy and rights-based constitutionalism were transformative, they also knew that this was an experiment. They expected future generations to improve upon the republic they created. So in our 250th anniversary, we can reconsider the origins of our government, democratic institutions, and broader civic life, and reflect on the ways we have changed them. So this is really a theme about civics. And then finally, our fifth theme, doing history, it takes a step back from the others, and it encourages us to invite our audiences to participate in the processes of doing history. The 250th challenges our field to explain how we interpret evidence and craft narratives about the past, engaging in open conversations about what history is, the many ways it is done, and why it matters. This is a theme about lifting the veil on research and interpretation and curatorial work. And by talking about our methods for learning about the past, we can help audiences better understand how new questions and evidence and perspectives inform our histories, how people can do history in their own lives, and how these histories can speak to present-day challenges. So we're hoping that the field guide themes will create a more widely shared story about American history, one that acknowledges its many tensions and ambiguities and informs our present and future. The themes in the guide, I want to know, also do align with the plans that have been laid out by America 250 and other major initiatives, lending unity to what will otherwise be, as I've said, a relatively grassroots and decentralized commemoration. That said, for some, the themes might feel broad and perhaps a little bit abstract. So to help ground things a bit, we have recently released a handbook that features over 30 low-cost, sustainable program ideas to provide direction and inspiration, especially for smaller or mid-sized history organizations, as they prepare for the 250th. The handbook was born out of a need we were repeatedly hearing from the field, the need for guidance in developing concrete program ideas that will engage varied audiences and meaningfully connect to the 250th within limited resources, budgetary or otherwise, that most of us face. So I'm just going to give you some peeks inside. It is available for free, but just to give you a sense. Each of the sample programs can be scaled up or down to fit the budget, capacity, and context of your organization. And by combining program ideas from the handbook with the themes in our Making History at 250 field guide, these resources together can offer a way for all organizations to connect to the 250th, no matter your size or type or location. So to put it simply, if your organization is still not sure how to participate in this anniversary, we think this handbook is for you. The handbook and the field guide, as I mentioned, are both available for free on our website. We've also mailed out 20,000 copies of the handbook to AASLH members, field service providers, and others. And I'll give more detail on this later. We're also offering some in-person and virtual planning workshops in the coming months that build off of both of these resources. So I'm just going to show you some more sample pages of the handbook so you can gain a sense of what sorts of ideas. And I circled some that I thought might be especially interesting. So a very simple social media program. You could do a Today in History. You could feature an asset in your collection with ties to a specific day for a Today in History post or series. You could host an open archive event and invite the community into the behind the scenes of your operations and your collection. You could do a program on student research projects and partner with local teachers or professors on a shared research effort that forges connections that will likely last well beyond 2026. And an oral history program where you gather stories from your community is another way to strengthen ties with those around you. So there are lots more ideas in here. I just wanted to highlight a few. But we can definitely talk in the Q&A more about this resource. I also, in this vein, wanted to share some upcoming AASLH programs that might be of interest to this group. So coming up first on November 21st, we'll be holding a half-day virtual workshop geared toward planning for the 250th. This will help practitioners both conceptually and concretely prepare for this commemoration's transformative potential. Attendees will learn more about the field guide and our new program handbook and how to effectively apply these tools to their site or organization. We'll also be holding this workshop on March 3rd, and I do want to note that registration is required and it does come with a fee for participation. And as an aside, there will also be a Train the Trainers webinar in December for field service organizations. Attendees to that Train the Trainer webinar will receive instruction on how to host versions of these workshops themselves. So if you provide field services or think of your organization in that sense and are interested in learning more, feel free to shoot me an email. One more program to highlight. On February 27th and 28th, we will be holding a virtual event, 250Con, that we will hope will serve as a galvanizing and unifying moment for the history field as we enter the final year of planning for the Semiquincentennial. The program is going to include several session types, including a keynote panel featuring leaders from the field, including Dr. Colleen Shogan, Archivist of the United States, a meet and greet with state 250th commissions, so you can go into the breakout room for your state and talk to representatives, and lightning rounds as well that showcase presentations from national organizations, breakout sessions for networking. Attendees will learn about national and state planning opportunities. They'll identify actionable ways to participate and join fellow practitioners in generating enthusiasm for this once-in-a-generation event. We're anticipating that the audience of 250Con will include museum workers, public historians, archivists, educators and interpreters, librarians, historic preservationists, scholars and students, and more. So we hope to see you there. And this is also an event that requires registration and a fee to attend. So before sort of wrapping things up, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time acknowledging the context in which all of this discussion about the 250th is occurring. One of the most frequent concerns we hear about planning for the 250th is how the history community can observe an event of national significance against the backdrop of a rapidly growing political, social, and cultural polarization. This challenge is not unique to commemorating the 250th. In fact, it's increasingly animating conversations about history work writ large as the field navigates the task of conducting our work in an age of hyperpartisanship and increasing efforts to censor whole history. So to help address these understandable anxieties among practitioners, as I mentioned, we held a virtual summit earlier this year called Doing History in Polarized Times. And out of those sessions with field-wide experts, I wanted to pull out a few takeaways that might be helpful. So number one, evidence shows that most Americans support whole history. So while there's significant conversation in the news media and public discourse and online about high temperature debates over history right now, there are multiple surveys and other forms of evaluation that demonstrate that the majority of people in America are interested in learning a more complete history of our country. So we encourage history organizations and sites to keep this in mind as they develop plans for the 250th anniversary, rather than inadvertently supporting a false consensus by amplifying the outraged but ultimately smaller portions of the population. Two, history organizations can retain and gain audiences' trust by showing their work. Many members of the public feel suspicious of what they perceive as attempts to tell them what to do or what to think. Audiences prefer history organizations to share what they call just the facts. Of course, as history practitioners, we understand that doing history requires critical engagement with at times conflicting sources of evidence, accounts, analyses, and perspectives. But most audience members do not view history in this way. So to avoid unduly furthering this misunderstanding of the historical process, history organizations can consider incorporating the how into the what of their programs. So this could mean directing audiences to bibliographies and further reading, citing and showing your sources, offering bylines to project staff, and acknowledging complexity and conflicting narratives up front. Being proactive rather than reactive about the nuance and ambiguity of the historical process will help preempt audience resistance to narratives they might find new or uncomfortable. So to put it simply, to strengthen your 250th programming, invite audiences into the work of doing history. Three, prepare staff and volunteers for difficult conversations and support them afterwards. Inevitably, the 250th is going to precipitate challenging conversations at history organizations. These institutions can help staff, volunteers, board members, and other stakeholders prepare for these situations by offering support and training in advance. So this could mean role-playing different scenarios, holding de-escalation or mental health trainings, designing safety plans, developing institution-wide messaging that is shared universally and implemented consistently. It's also worth equipping staff and volunteers and your board members and stakeholders with the research I mentioned on public attitudes towards history so that they better understand the relatively small proportion of extreme voices in relation to the views of the majority of the population. Next, we recommend that organizations focus on effective communication rather than winning the conversation. So there are few things harder in a disagreement than tempering the urge to prove one's point. I feel it all the time. However, we are suggesting that history practitioners promote communication strategies that will be most effective, especially in the context of the 250th. These include emphasizing listening over telling, working to build trust by displaying empathy and identifying commonalities, and having an open mind when faced with differing perspectives. These methods do not, of course, mean yielding on documentable facts or legitimizing inappropriate or bigoted opinions, but they do entail using proven techniques that encourage patience and respect and humility to help build common ground. Focusing on effective communication may also mean prioritizing attachment to ideas over attachment to certain words, as well as being comfortable with leaving a conversation feeling kind of unsatisfied. We encourage practitioners to use the tested techniques in our Reframing History Toolkit and other resources for specific strategies for strengthening communication about history. So that toolkit and the report are available for free, and we also just released a free technical leaflet on trust and strategy and communication that might be of interest. And finally, we recommend that you find strength in partnerships and community. It's easy for individual practitioners or institutions to feel overwhelmed and alone in navigating difficult conversations like this. But keep in mind that these issues are affecting history organizations and sites around the country at the local, state, and regional levels. Reaching out to nearby organizations, attending conferences, participating in trainings on relevant topics can help you build a network of mutual support. And these networks can serve not only as avenues for exchanging strategies and ideas for addressing challenging interactions, but they can also offer a source of much needed solidarity during a difficult time for the history community. As many members of your audiences may also be feeling the strain of this hyperpolarized age, we encourage you to offer your institution as a refuge for critical thinking and discourse, while also finding meaningful ways to serve and support your diverse constituencies. So through our annual meeting, affinity networks, professional development offerings, and more, AASLH can offer guidance on best practices in community engagement in that regard. So I realize that these takeaways cannot answer every anxiety that history doers might be feeling right now in the current environment, but AASLH staff is going to continue our research of productive strategies, our support for practitioner needs, and our advocacy for whole history in the lead up to 2026 and beyond. So I'm going to wrap up soon. I do want to close first by noting that many of the resources I've discussed today are available for free. I think many of them are in the chat, but you can email me asking more. You can have access to even more resources like this, as well as a nationwide network of your peers if you consider becoming an AASLH member. So if you want to learn more about that process or anything else I've mentioned today, just get in touch. But I want to really close by emphasizing that the 250th is a chance for Americans of all beliefs and experiences to engage critically with our nation's past and understand its connections to the present. And the next years are, for all of us, a chance to prepare, think big, look to the future. Not only setting up programs and partnerships, but getting our administrative houses in order and bringing our practices up to speed and evaluating what we do and why we do it. And that's really where I want to leave us today by urging you to think ahead. There's not a ton of time left. While there were undoubtedly flaws in the 1976 bicentennial commemoration, I think it's important to remember that there was also a huge flood of general public interest in American history and genealogy. There's a broadening attention to diverse histories, a deeper grassroots appreciation for local history, the creation of thousands of local history projects and organizations, as well as the emergence of the formal public history movement itself. So, take a minute to think, could the legacy of the 250th be even bigger? What can emerge from this anniversary? What groundwork can we lay for the future? This moment, and I probably have said this 10 times at this point, but is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to renew public engagement with history and to strengthen our history organizations. We think the field is primed to further that vision, and with creativity and collaboration, we can really do something special. So thank you for giving me some time. I'm really excited to see what you all do, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Madeline. We greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, again, please put them in the chat. You can direct them to everybody in the chat, or just me, or just Julia, which is SAAHQ. And to get it going, I do have one question, just kind of going on what you're talking about. We've talked a lot about those commissions and all of the efforts going on. If we at our own institution are thinking of doing something, do we need to coordinate with a commission, or can we just kind of grab something off of the AASLH toolkit and maybe just do that on our own? And what do you recommend? What are people doing? What are others doing, so we know kind of where we can fit in?
Sure, that's a great question. You can do what you wish. There's no requirement to go through your state 250th commission. And so the handbook is available for whoever wants it, and they can start using it right away. It may be in your interest to reach out to your state 250th commission to see what they're doing, because it's completely possible that they already have an initiative underway that you would be able to hook into. So it really varies state by state. All of the states are in completely different places in terms of how far along their commission is set up in terms of infrastructure, the state of their funding for their commission. So if you go to our website, we have a list of the state commissions. When they have a web presence, we link to it directly. So this isn't a very clear answer, but my recommendation would be poke around, find out if your state, has an active commission. Reach out if it feels, like it would be helpful to you, but I wouldn't wait on them to create your own plans. You can kind of start thinking at the grassroots level and reach out to them at the same time.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Madeline. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to SA and our membership. I'm sort of wondering, as I watched your presentation, if you know of particular archives or repositories who are already working on things that could serve as examples. And if you don't, that might be a tall order. And if you don't, do you know of spaces where people are starting to share ideas? And this is also my pitch from SAA for folks. If you are working on something for your America 250, please reach out to me. My email, I'll put it in the chat as well, is jpillard@archivist.org. And I would love to hear what our members are already working on. But yeah, Madeline, do you know any specific examples or places people are collaborating?
I mean, the National Archives has its initiatives, but at the sort of state or local level, there's nothing specific coming to mind. What I will say is that the state commissions are all organized differently. So some states went the route of forming a new entity as its planning body and populating it with sort of leaders from their state's field. Some took something like the state archives or their historical commission or state museum and charged them with leading the efforts. So depending on the state, there may be an archival effort underway. Like I said, North Carolina, I know part of their state level planning is digitizing archival materials. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a really cool example of a project. But in terms of becoming aware of what's underway, we do have our national initiative tracker on our website. If you email me with more time, I can poke around and answer like a very specific question. If someone emails me and says, I'm from this state, do you know what's going on? I can either poke around or try to give you some contact information for your state level representatives so that you can ask them for what's really going on the ground there. And then I think with a lot of the smaller organizations, which often don't have the resources to do, multi-year planning, many of them are just beginning their planning. And so I think we're going to see a lot of projects starting to populate as we enter 2025. Attending 250Con, if it's of interest to you, is going to be, I think, a really good way to connect with other organizations as they put their plans together. So that might be another opportunity if you're trying to figure out, if you can find some case studies from your region or from, similar institutions.
Thank you so much. That is extremely useful to know. I will also say for folks who are watching, we do have a couple people sharing resources in the chat. Linda shared something from the Connecticut League of Museums. Meg Phillips has shared information from the National Archives. Lauren asks, Madeline, and I'm seeking the link now, but where can people register for the 250Con that you mentioned earlier?
That is a great question. Registration has not opened yet, so the answer today is nowhere. But we're hoping to open registration and start spreading the word more widely in November. Don't hold me to that. We're still pulling together some of the threads, but that is the goal, to open in November. And then it'll be 2 afternoons, virtual, February 27th and 28th.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to stop looking for that link because it doesn't exist. I will encourage other folks to please share questions if you have them in the chat. This is a space to sort of get your questions answered as we are learning more about America 250 and how you can acknowledge the anniversary. Brian, do you have any other questions that you want to share?
Yeah, well, so one of the first slides, right, the grapple with history's complexity, and we talk a lot about archives as a
Brian, I'm going to stop you for a minute. Your microphone is super muffled
oh,
for some reason.
okay. Is it a little bit better?
Yeah, we got you. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So a lot of times we talk about archives as stewards of this essential evidence of our democracy, of our society. And you mentioned earlier grappling with history's complexity. And I'm just wondering, are you seeing places for that, the sharing of documents that deal with the complexity, that try to help people understand what historical triangulation is, where you're bringing in 3 or 4 different documents that shed light on one occurrence or a larger theme within what we do.
Yeah, I think that's the route that a lot of 250th programs are going to take, because we know that primary source based programming can be really powerful. I think I've heard of a lot of different teacher-based programming for the 250th that I think is heavily reliant on sort of looking at different primary sources side by side. Many of the themes I mentioned in the field guide and the doing history theme in particular, I think really encourages that approach to bring people into the process of, what is the evidence that we have access to? Why do we have access to that evidence? What's the context behind it? How should we interpret it? All of that. So I think I see that a lot in educator programming, a lot of the suggestions in the program handbook, I think would key into that approach as well. And I think that, you're going to see that in some of the national initiatives as well. I know that someone put in the chat, I think the National Archives Declaration 250, and I think the National Constitution Center are also working on not exclusively, but some of their efforts are sort of more document based in their programming. So I think you're going to see that at the local, state, and national level.
Thank you.
Awesome.
We do have a question here that is, so back at the bicentennial, 1976, there was a college bicentennial college program. And our question is there a similar initiative for the semiquincentennial for
College
colleges?
initiative?
Yeah.
That's interesting. No, I'm not aware of one. Where is that? I'm not aware of that. Would that be a national network of colleges working together on programming? Is that what that was? I'm guessing.
I'm guessing, Amy, if she would like to ask it directly, but yeah, I believe so that it is
Yeah,
a
I haven't
national
heard of
network
that.
of colleges that were united around the theme of it. I've never heard of it either.
Yeah,
It's
that's
intriguing.
interesting.
I honestly don't know much. Sorry to interrupt. I just saw it in our archival materials. They used the logo, unofficial logo on college, like newspapers and such. So I just curious if there was something similar again. Thank
Yeah, sorry, I don't know anything about that, but it sounds really interesting. There's some very good books about the bicentennial as well. I don't have the I'll try to send them to Julia afterwards. But if anyone's trying to look backwards to look forwards, which we love to do, there's some good interesting analyses of sort of how it went.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And once you send me that list, I'd be happy. I will try for folks who are on this call and for folks who registered to pull together some resources to send out within the next couple of weeks. That includes the recording of this event, since it has a lot of really good information in it. We have another question that's come into the chat from Morgan. Morgan says, I work in a library in the state and genealogy department, and we have been collecting oral histories for the last year. We have tried to reach out to our city/county to get something started beyond our work. Do you have any suggestions?
I guess without knowing much more, I would suggest it depends. It's very disparate effort. It depends which departments you're working from. You know, for some state or county levels, they're putting it under sort of their history branch. Some are putting it under their economic development branch or their tourism branch. And so it's possible that either the departments that perhaps you reached out to aren't the ones charged with planning for the 250th, or your city or county hasn't actually done any planning for the 250th, which is very common. We have a technical leaflet, which I can also send to Julia, about forming a local 250th commission at the local level, which has a lot of concrete recommendations for how to get traction going. And so it might mean that you have to sort of start your own effort from the ground up, which sounds like a lot of work, but could also be very exciting. So I'm not sure, you know, not knowing the specific city or county that you're in, but I would perhaps try a few other departments. And if you're not getting any traction, you could try your state, or you could try to do it yourself at the local level.
Excellent. And thank you so much for that question, Morgan. That's a good question, especially for folks who are working in a space where there may not be a commission that's been formed yet. Do other people have questions? I will invite you to add them to the chat if you do. As I mentioned, I will pull together an email to be sent out to you if you register that will contain the link to this recording, as well as a bunch of different resources you can use. Madeleine has just dropped that technical leaflet PDF in the chat, so be sure to check that out, as well as the other links that were added earlier during the event. I'm going to leave it for just about 30 more seconds if you have other questions, and if not, I'm not going to tie you all here. I know everyone here is a very busy person working in the world of archives. Brian, do you have anything to add? Other questions?
Well, I think Amy's question was great in that archivists know things that nobody else does, right? We have all this wealth of great information. Nobody's heard of this bicentennial college project, and leave it to an archivist to know that. And so that's why we need to have a seat at the table. And I don't think anybody's going to hold that seat for us necessarily. So we need to go seize that seat at the table and invite ourselves into the conversation to make sure that we can make our records and our resources and the services that we provide a lot more relevant and evident to people. They know they love us, they just don't know they love us yet. And so I think Amy is a perfect example of, well, I've heard of something, what else? And how many of those stories do we have in our communities that we could tell that nobody knows about if it weren't for us?
Yeah, that is a really good point. I think, you know, I'm excited to see what this community comes up with. With that said, I want to say thank you so much one more time to Madeleine for coming in and sharing all of this information. It's always a really wonderful moment when we can hear from other organizations and get information on moments like this. And thank you to everyone who came and attended for your attention. We really appreciate it, and we really can't wait to see what you do. So with that, I'm going to say have a great rest of your Friday. Enjoy the hopefully cooler fall weather this weekend. And I look forward to hearing from all of you on your America 250 project soon. All right.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone.